Okay, so in this session, we will have a glimpse of training and development. So training and development refers to educational activities within a company. So let's say, for example, in a work setting created to enhance the knowledge, skills, and abilities or the case house of employees while providing them the information and some instruction on how to be a better performer or employee inside this organization with this specific task they are assigned to. So training is a short-term reactive process meant to operate and process while development is assigned or designed to continuous proactive process meant for executives. So in training, employees aim is to develop additional skills, and in development, it tends to develop a total personality. So in training, the initiative is taken by the management with the objective of meeting the present need of an employee. Okay, so on the other hand, in development, initiative is taken by the individual with the objective to meet the future need of an employee. So now, let's have a video presentation on training and development for a while.
Let's take a look at the basics of training and development. Competency models identify the knowledge, skills, and abilities, known as KSAs, needed to perform a particular job in an organization. We can utilize competency models to identify what types of training new employees or an employee changing jobs might need. We go through a process of identifying and providing the training, evaluating how well the employee has learned, and then assessing the training process itself using one of several options. In this course, we'll discuss both organizational training and employee development. The two are related but separate pieces of the organization's processes involving the management of its employees. Training is the process of teaching employees the skills necessary to perform a job. We train employees to provide them with the KSAs they will need to succeed in their work. Training is primarily intended to be put to immediate use by the individual being trained. Somewhat in contrast to the training that we do so that employees can do their job or do an existing job better is the process of employee development. Both colleges and corporations have been criticized for not doing a good enough job of developing business leaders. This is one of the reasons why this course focuses on developing HR skills, not just knowledge. Employee development is ongoing education to improve knowledge and skills for present and future jobs. So, employee development is designed to teach our workers how to move up in the organization in the future by becoming skilled at those tasks that they will need to know to move into those higher level jobs. Development tends to be less technical and is aimed at improving human, communication, conceptual, and decision-making skills in employees. To remain competitive in today's dynamic environment, organizations must have employees who maintain up-to-date knowledge and skills, and development plays an important role in this effort.
Okay, now let's talk about let's ask a question about training development. So first, what is the purpose of training and development in an organization? So one of the reasons why training is absolutely important for any business is number one, it offers lowering or it lowers the attrition rate. So training is one of the best ways to value our employees. So it shows them that they are not or they are investment in our company. So in their well-being, of course, and growth as they are in our growth as a company. So employees who are looked after will never want to look elsewhere. So second one is it prepares for upcoming challenges. So training can be a preemptive to step to train employees for accepted, expected, or unexpected changes in the industry. So in times like ours when trends change constantly under the influence of online evolution, keeping our teams prepared just makes good sense. Okay, so the third one, it fosters leadership. So there is no better way to create future leaders than to train them or train the best bunch of our employees. So this will also lead to a clear career path for employees, preventing attrition and dissatisfaction. The last one, it offers growth of the company. Okay, so any company dedicated to training and development, its workforce will only prosper and move forward. So the employees are a major part of company's assets, and taking care of them will mean taking care of the organization as well. Okay, now let's talk about some of the key components of learning. Okay, so after discussing this chapter, we would want to learn some of discussion the forces influencing the workplace as well as learning, and we try to explain how training can help companies deal with these forces. So number two, we want to draw a figure or some diagrams and explain how training development, informal training, and knowledge management contribute to business success. And the third one, we want to discuss various aspects of the training design processes. The fourth one is to describe the amount of types of training. And the fifth one is to discuss the key roles for training professionals. And the last one, we would want to know and identify appropriate resources such as the journals or websites for learning about training, research, and its practice. Okay, so there are some terminologies with the training development that we want to learn. So number one is competitiveness. So it refers to the company's ability to maintain and gain market share in an industry. And the second one is human resource management. So it refers to some policies, practices, and systems that influence employees' behavior, attitudes, and performance. Okay, so we also have stakeholders who refer to some community or customers as well, or clients that we have in our company, employees, and all other parties that have an interest in seeing that the company succeeds. Okay. So as you can see right here, this is a figure that shows the role of training and development for the business. So the overall goal of the training and development is learning. So now let us discuss this one by one. So learning refers to employees acquiring, okay, knowledge, skills, and abilities or competencies, attitudes, as well as behaviors. Okay, so learning needs to demonstrate how it contributes to the company's competitive advantage through improving employee performance, supporting the business strategy, such as growing the business and contributing positively to business outcomes such as quality, productivity, development of new products, as well as retaining employees. Now, we also have human capital. So human capital refers to some knowledge or know what, advanced skills or know-how, system understanding and creativity, and motivation to deliver high-quality products and services. Now, human capital may be more valuable than physical capital such as equipment or some technologies, or financial capital such as monetary assets or cash to provide for a company with an advantage over its competitors, because it is difficult to imitate or purchase, and it's unique to the company. So this is what we call the human capital. Of course, there are a number of different ways that learning occurs in a company. There are represented on the outside of the circle presented right here. Okay, so now let's have a presentation again on learning and development.
In this presentation, we'll discuss the essential components of creating a process to ensure that learning and development activities are successful. Learning and development encompasses a range of activities that enable employees to perform their jobs effectively and efficiently now and into the future. Employee orientation ensures that new employees know and understand company policies and procedures. When done well, orientation helps employees get off to a good start. Orientation is a foundation of sound training and development programs in any organization. For many companies, the new employee orientation process is only one part of a larger program referred to as onboarding. Onboarding refers to the hiring and integration process used to socialize new employees into an organization. This process has become more important to employers in recent years as they've recognized the critical role of human capital in organizational success. Learning involves acquiring both tactic and explicit knowledge. Employees acquire knowledge through formal and informal training activities and other experiences. Training is the systematic process of providing employees with the competencies, knowledge, skills, and abilities required to do their jobs. The purpose of training is to improve how well employees perform their current jobs. Development, in contrast, is future-based and aims to prepare employees to take on additional responsibilities in different jobs, usually at a higher level. Both training and development help an organization equip its workforce to gain and sustain a competitive advantage. An effective training program results from a systematic process, as shown in this flowchart, which includes needs assessment, design, implementation, and evaluation. Each part of this training process is critical. If you're familiar with the ADDIE model or ADDIE framework for training and development, you'll notice many of the elements exist in this training process model. Training has tremendous potential to improve the performance of employees, but it often is costly and time-consuming. Consequently, wise managers conduct a training needs assessment to understand where training activities can have the most impact in their organization. A training needs assessment identifies where gaps exist between what employees should be doing and what they're actually doing. Training is used to fill those gaps. The needs assessment begins with an organizational analysis to determine a firm's progress towards achieving its goals and objectives. Scanning the environment for opportunities and threats and evaluating the strengths and weaknesses internally will help you identify training gaps. After the organizational analysis, the next step is to conduct a task analysis. The purpose of task analysis is to identify gaps between KSAs needed to perform work and support the organization's objectives and the employee's current KSAs. An organizational analysis focuses on identifying training gaps across a company's workforce. A task analysis focuses on identifying the specific training content needed to close the gaps between what employees know and what they're able to currently do and the KSAs they should possess to actually make a value-added contribution to the organization. A person analysis involves deciding which employees actually need to participate in training programs. The information needed to make this decision can come from a variety of sources, including observation, performance appraisals, recommendations, and employee skills inventories. The information from the needs analysis tells managers where in the organization training is needed, what the focus of training initiatives should be, and which employees should participate. This is critical information, but training must also be effectively designed to have value. A clear understanding of the goals of the programming at the beginning of the designing process helps ensure the training program meets its results and is oriented towards supporting an organization's mission. To design good training, we need to understand that people have different learning styles. Learning styles affect how people absorb and process information. There are a number of ways to categorize styles. Often cited approaches categorizes learners as auditory, visual, or kinesthetic. This is known as the VAK model. We learned to feed ourselves and put on our clothes when we were toddlers. This learning took place on the job, because our job at the time was to learn to take care of ourselves. As we entered school, we learned in the classroom, and we often saw a variety of teaching methods. You probably experienced different types of computer-aided learning through your development as well. The ways that you've been trained to do things in the past are not that different from how you'll train employees to do things in the future. We just need to be mindful of adult learning principles and how that applies in the workplace. We are all familiar with classroom training by virtue of being students for many years. Lectures can be an effective way to disseminate simple information, but lectures don't necessarily facilitate increase the effectiveness of classroom training. E-learning involves using the internet and a computer-based system to deliver training programs. Advances in technology and accessibility have changed training for the better in the use of online, virtual, and simulation-based e-learning, which is accessible to employees at any time they need it or want it. You will have a myriad of training methods to choose from, including those you see here. Make sure the method of training delivery is appropriate for the content and the audience that you've selected. Methods include on the job, lecture, simulation, role play, case study, demonstration, activities, discussion, and the list goes on. The final component of a successful training program is evaluation. Training programs are expensive, so it's critical to make sure they're delivering results. Training professionals have identified 5 levels of evaluation. First, reaction. Participants complete an evaluation. Second, learning. Participants complete knowledge or skills tests. Third, behavior. Performance appraisal and observations are conducted to verify learning. 4, results. Were there changes in productivity? We measure those things. And finally, return on investment. We use data analysis of cost and benefits to look at the value of training for our organization.
Okay, so that's a brief background on learning and development on how it is important for us to invest on learning of our employees. So just like you and other students, no, we tend to invest with our learning by means of attending to universities, attending to some courses or subjects related to our future career. So we are trying to learn more of different strategies as well as different knowledge and knowledge, skills and abilities related to our future career. Okay, so now let's proceed with some of the important concepts of training and development. Again, training refers to planned effort by a company to facilitate learning of job-related competencies. So unlike learning, training is a planned one. So it aims to provide job-related competencies or making effort to develop our competencies, knowledge, skills, and behaviors, okay, of these employees. Okay, the development, on the other hand, refers to training as well as formal education, job experiences, relationship, and assessment of personality, skills, and abilities that help employees prepare for future job positions. So in terms of training, it aims the employees to master the knowledge, skills, and behaviors emphasized in training and apply them to their day-to-day activities. So traditionally, companies have relied on formal training through a course or a program or event to teach employees the knowledge, skills, and behaviors they need to successfully perform their job. So development, on the other hand, is similar to training, except that it tends to be more future focused. Okay, so development refers to training as well as formal education, job experiences, relationship, and assessment personality skills. Okay. So now, let's have again another video on training and development.
HR Basics is a series of short lessons designed to highlight what you need to know about a particular human resource management topic. In today's HR Basics, we explore training and development, discussing the importance of the actions employers take to improve the performance and better staff through learning and growth opportunities. Training is the development and delivery of information people will use in their jobs. This definition distinguishes training from other situations where people are provided information, but they're not necessarily expected to use it. The distinction between training and non-training activities is an important one. Mainly, the process for developing training is substantially different from that of non-training activities. Development refers to learning interventions that make people better. Employee development is almost universally recognized as a strategic tool for an organization's continuing growth, productivity, and ability to retain valuable employees. No matter training or development, people learn in various ways. Learning styles indicate the most effective methods of instruction for various types of learners. When developing training content and delivery methods, recognizing these differences enhances the effectiveness of training. 3 distinct learning styles are visual. Our visual learners like to see when learning. Auditory. These learners simply learn better by listening. And kinesthetic. These learners best acquire new skills and knowledge by doing something. Although everyone learns in all of these styles, each person has one dominant learning style. A study of over 5,300 participants identified the following breakdown among learning styles, which are believed to be representative of the general population. 29% of participants were visual, while 34% were auditory, and 37% were kinesthetic. Although each person normally has one dominant learning style, each of us learns in all 3 ways. A small number of people learn just as easily using any of the 3 styles. Trainers should recognize these various styles and present material to stimulate all 3. Often, when people are asked to assume a trainer role, they begin with an image of training based on how they were taught in the past. In most instances, the image in their minds is closely related to how they were taught as children in school. But there are some significant differences between children and adults as learners. It's important to understand these differences, referred to pedagogy, or the art and science of helping kids learn, and andragogy, the art and science of helping adults learn, so that you can gear your training to the needs of your adult audience. Let's first look at pedagogy, how we learned as kids. Typically, children rely on others to decide what is important to be learned, such as the teacher in the classroom. They accept information that's being presented at face value with very little question. They expect what they're learning to be useful in their long-term future, and they have little to no experience upon which to draw in their learning environment, and as such have little ability to serve as a knowledgeable resource for the teacher or classmates in their learning environment. Andragogy, or how adults learn, is a little bit different. For instance, adults decide for themselves what's important to be learned. They need to verify information that's taught or provided in a lesson based on their own beliefs and experiences. They expect to have learning that's immediately useful to them, and have a lot of past experience upon which to draw from in their learning environments, and therefore have a significant ability to serve as a knowledgeable resource to the trainer and learners around them. The differences between children and adults as learners point to the need to follow specific principles when training adults. There's 7. First, focus on real-world problems. Second, emphasize how learning can be applied. Third, relate learning to the goals of the learner. Fourth, relate the learning to past experiences of the learner. Fifth, allow debate and challenge of ideas. Sixth, listen to and respect the opinions of learners. And seventh, and finally, encourage learners to be a resource to you, the instructor, and to one another. With that, you can see it's important to know and understand the most basic training tool used by professional trainers. It's called the ADDIE model. You see it here. The ADDIE model is a generic, systematic, step-by-step framework that trainers use to develop great initiatives. In the first phase, analysis, needs and objectives of the learning are established. In the design phase, learning objectives, session structure, and resources are identified. During the development phase, content for the training session is completed. The implementation phase involves the preparation and delivery of training content, and finally the evaluation phase is an ongoing process that ensures all stated goals of the learning process will meet specified needs identified in analysis. Many organizations, recognizing the strategic importance of learning, strive to become learning organizations. A learning organization embraces a culture of lifelong learning, enabling all employees to acquire and share knowledge all the time. Training processes are carefully scrutinized and aligned with organizational goals. Managers take an active role in identifying training needs and helping to ensure that employees use their training in their work. Also, employees are actively encouraged to share knowledge with colleagues and other work groups. In a learning organization, training is seen as one part of a system designed to develop people through continuous learning. A great way that learning organizations practically apply their commitment is an organizational university, commonly referred to as a corporate university, as a model for delivering organizational learning. To gain the advantages of centralized training, many organizations use the organizational university model. Organizational universities are internal, organizational entities designed to brand and execute training and development initiatives that foster a culture of learning. A corporate university can help make learning more strategic by providing a clear mission and vision for learning and ensure that it's aligned with business needs. It can also help organizations who have a strong business culture and values ensure that those values and mission are emphasized in learning curriculum. This occurs through providing consistent training activities, disseminating best learning practices, effectively using technology, and establishing partnerships to develop custom training programs that serve employee and organizational needs. Organizational universities represent one of the most powerful growing trends in the organizational environment today. Experts estimate that more than 2,000 organizational universities exist in the United States. The number of organizational universities is growing. Currently, 29% of organizations are establishing an organizational university or planning to do so, and 95% of employees indicate a greater interest and connection with learning through an organizational university. The organizational university phenomenon is an important tool to help HR strategically manage talent and implement great learning and development.
Okay. After giving you some background of training and development, now let us proceed with some of these strategies or some approach on how we can deliver some learning materials for our employees, for instance. Okay, so there are two types of training. We have formal and informal training. So formal training refers to training and development programs or courses and events that are developed and organized by the company, for instance. So typically employees are required to attend or complete these programs, right? And which can include face-to-face training programs. But now we are utilizing most likely online programs or online training, so such as instructor-led courses, just like this one. Now we also have informal learning. So informal learning is also important for facilitating the development of human capital or our employees as well. So informal learning refers to learning that is a learner initiated. So for instance, you or an employee might initiate his or her own pace of learning. So it involves action in doing it that is motivated by an intent to develop and does not occur in a formal learning setting. Okay, so informal learning occurs without a trainer or instructor, and its breadth or depth and timing is controlled by the employee himself or herself. So it occurs on an as needed basis, okay, and may involve an employee learning either alone or through a face-to-face or technology-aided social interaction. So informal learning can occur through many different ways, including casual and planned interactions with peers. We also have email, informal mentoring, or company developed or publicly available social networking websites such as Facebook or Twitter. Now, one estimate is that informal learning may account for about 75% of learning within organization. So there are employees that we can have in an organization that might be interested to develop his or her characteristics or abilities, knowledge, as well as skills in terms of his or her own pace. So this is what we call informal learning. Now let's have another video presentation on how these formal and informal training further differ from one another.
Informal training. So formal and informal training is about developing and improving the workplace skills of your staff. And as a result, because you've invested in training, it's likely to increase motivation and increase retention, that's staff retention. Now, formal training tends to be structured and tailored to specific learning outcomes. And it also tends to be outside the workplace. Examples of formal training is one, could be a college or university course, or it could be some form of specific qualification. Now, the advantages of doing formal training, well, number one is that it involves no distractions because you are taken away from the workplace usually, so therefore you can focus on your specific learning outcome. Also, it's likely that you're trained by a paid expert because the business has paid for your training, your formal training. But the disadvantages of this is that number one, there is that cost, there is that training cost, and also beyond that, it could be that the course is very far away, so there could be extra transport costs or accommodation costs if it's a more than one day training course. Now, on the other side, formal training is informal training. Informal training is often completed on the job, and it tends to occur, therefore, in the workplace. It's very practical based. Examples of informal training could be observations of your co-workers or demonstrations by your co-workers. Now, the advantages of informal training, it tends to be cheaper because you've not paid for the formal training. It also tends to mean that the workers are more productive in the short term because they haven't been removed from the workplace. They're still at the workplace. So after the observation, they might do a piece of whatever it is themselves. So therefore, they're productive in the short term. And thirdly, it could build team bonding or high morale because you're building those connections, those communications between the co-workers. But the disadvantages of informal training is one, the mentor's time is constrained because they're giving observations, they're giving demonstrations, maybe they're not actually doing the role that they should be doing, so they're not as productive, the mentors that is. And also it could be those mentors, they pass on bad practice. It could be they show shortcuts that aren't the exactly correct way that you should do it. Particularly in manufacturing, this could be a concern because it could lead to more defects. So it's worth thinking about the pros and the cons of formal and informal training, and I'll be seeing you in the next session.
Okay, so this is basically the difference between the formal and informal training. So you can observe yourselves, know that sometimes you may have this informal training by your own. You want to learn some skills related to your uh, future career. So let's say, for example, you want to learn on some basics of human resources. You might go to YouTube tutorials. You might go to some mentors. You might ask some of your professors related to this, who might be related to this topic you want to learn. So this is how formal and informal training differs from one another. So explicit knowledge refers to knowledge that is well documented, easily articulated, and easily transferred from person to person. So for example, explicit knowledge include processes, checklists, flowcharts, formulas, and definitions inside the organization. So you can really have the access on this material. So explicit knowledge tends to be primary focus of formal training and employee development. So most likely during the training and development or learning and development programs or seminars or trainings, you might be given some materials so you can look into it, some objectives as well as the processes of these training. So this is what we call the explicit knowledge. Okay, so on the other hand, we have tacit knowledge. On the tacit knowledge refers to personal knowledge based on individual experiences that is difficult to codify. So informal learning is central to the development of tacit knowledge because it involves employee interactions in personal relationship. So unlike explicit knowledge, tacit knowledge usually gathered from his or her peers or colleagues and experts through this knowledge being shared. As we have known, the characteristics of formal training and development programs such as the relatively short duration of classroom or online training just like this one and limited opportunities for practice. So it may limit the extent to which tacit knowledge can be acquired. Of course, it is important to recognize that informal learning cannot replace formal training, okay, and employee development. So formal training and development are still needed to prepare employees for their jobs and to help them advance to future positions. Now, informal learning, again, complements training by helping employees to gain this tacit knowledge that formal training cannot provide. Okay, so knowledge management, on the other hand, refers to the process of enhancing company performance by designing and implementing tools, processes, systems, structures, and cultures to improve the creation, sharing, and use of knowledge. So knowledge management contributes to informal learning. So let's say, for example, that a security officers need to need to provide timely information in order to protect the clients or the customers and the property itself. Now, seeking and sharing knowledge can help save lives, okay, by facilitating through these security officers. Now, as a result, a company, let's say, for example, develop an internet and social networking solution, particularly for security purposes. So it provides access to company materials, announcement, policies, procedures, and the like. Now, it can be accessed from anywhere, all right? So giving employees the ability to ask questions across the company as well as within their office, location, or work team. So it can be accessed right there and there. So the solution includes for this problem, okay, could be a social networking feature similar to Facebook. Now, employee can create profiles that have their skills, interests, achievements, and projects and contact information, so they can participate in threaded discussions. So the employees can be tagged, can be used to identify similar documents or discussions on the same topic. So as we may all know today, intangible assets, just like we have mentioned a while ago, or assets or accounts for most of the company's value. So they are very valuable for the company. So to protect it, for instance, let's say, for example, Caterpillar's web-based knowledge management system. So this is basically a system being offered to the company, okay, known as Knowledge Network, has thousands of communities of practice. Now, they range in size from small teams to hundreds of employees worldwide. Now, the communities of practice are useful for employees to gain both explicit and tacit knowledge. They are used to contribute information, pose questions, and provide space for reference materials. Okay, one community of practice focus on voltage joints. Let's say, for example, is others are related to fasteners, or other employees are focused on a specific flow. Okay, so this gives specialized employees who generally work alone in manufacturing facilities, let's say, for example. Okay, overall, the community of practice has resulted in improving decision making, increased collaboration and teamwork, and better product and design development. Okay, for us to have a better knowledge or better background on knowledge management, let's have another video on knowledge management.
So, what does knowledge management do? Every day, people and organizations need, use, and generate knowledge. The total sum of an organization's knowledge basically consists of what its employees know and what is stored in the different repositories of knowledge, such as documents, emails, procedures, and so on. But most often, an organization is much less than the sum of its parts. In other words, the knowledge that it possesses is not available to everyone when they need it. This could be because they do not know where it is, or even that it exists, or because they cannot access it, or even because the person holding the knowledge is unwilling to share. In order to be competitive, a firm needs to understand what it knows and what it needs to know in order to achieve its strategic objectives. It needs to identify the most valuable knowledge and to transfer or share it with whomever needs it in the organization. Often, however, the most valuable knowledge is not easy to identify or share because it is deep within the minds of experts. Here, to paraphrase Davenport and Prusak, it exists as a fluid mix of framed experience, values, contextual information, and expert insight. To understand why the most valuable knowledge is so tied to experience, know-how, and context, ask yourself why a university can never produce an experienced manager. There is no way to extract the knowledge of an expert and place it in a document so that upon reading it, a beginner becomes an expert. This kind of knowledge is called tacit knowledge, and it is best transferred through master-apprentice relationships, common work projects, and other forms of collaboration and socialization. Beyond transferring and protecting existing knowledge, firms also need to generate environments where new knowledge can be created. Knowledge is best created in an unstructured context where people are free to experiment and where failure is seen as part of the learning process. It is best created when different kinds of knowledge and the people possessing it interact, combine, socialize, and build on their know-how and know-what. This is where knowledge management comes in, and this is why it must never be confused with information management, which deals with the transfer of easily codifiable facts and figures. Although people argue about the scope of KM all the time, generally, KM involves understanding what knowledge the firm needs in order to be competitive in the short and long term. This very much ties it in with corporate strategy. An understanding of what knowledge the firm actually possesses and where this knowledge is found. Getting the right knowledge to the right people at the right time. Making sure that valuable knowledge is not lost, for example, if key employees leave or retire. And creating an environment where new, relevant knowledge can be created. To achieve this, KM needs to ensure that an organization has the right organizational culture where people want to share, collaborate, socialize, and learn, has the right processes for detection and categorization of knowledge, has the right processes and environments where people can share, collaborate, learn, and innovate. These could include cross-functional project teams, employee rotation across departments, common wikis, documentation requirements, master-apprentice relationships, and so on and so on. And finally, that it has the right technological infrastructure It conveys codified knowledge to whomever needs it at the right time, while supporting the processes, environments, and culture for the transfer of tacit knowledge. The exact role of technology in this context is a hotly debated issue, and it is something that we will return to later. You can also find an in-depth discussion of this on the KMT website. Suffice it to say that if technology is properly designed and aligned to the processes in the firm, thereby implemented in a way that does not disrupt existing culture and processes but supports them, then it can be a very valuable tool in the transfer and sharing of knowledge. So, to recap, KM is about establishing the right organizational processes, environments, culture, and technological infrastructure to help you understand what you know relative to what you need to know, and then share, protect, and further develop key knowledge and knowledge assets. Thank you for watching. To learn
Okay, so this video presentation that we have provided you is very important for us to have the knowledge on knowledge management. That there are times that some companies tend to give information or give knowledge to individuals, especially those who are new in a company. So we are trying, the company is trying to give you some knowledge as well as um, expertise in that particular area by means of giving you some facts as well as figures or modules related to this work that you're trying to cover, right? So knowledge management give you some insight on how to deal with some important jobs that should be done in a particular area. Okay, so now let's have designing effective training. Okay, so training design process refers to a systematic approach for developing training program. Now let's proceed with the training design process. So number one, so this figure that you can see right here is a figure that's based on principles of ISD or instructional system design. Okay, take note of that, instructional system design. So instructional system design or ISD refers to a process for designing and developing training programs. There is not one universally accepted instructional system design or development model. However, the training design process sometimes is referred to ADDIE model, which had been introduced to us in the earlier part of our discussion because it includes analysis, design, and development implementation, as well as lastly, evaluation. So the figure presents the 7 steps in the process. So step number 1 is a needs assessment. Can you see the slide? Can you see the figure? So step 1 is needs assessment for the first one, which is necessary to identify whether training is needed. So how can we go about that? So training assessment is most likely being introduced to us by means of survey forms or asking the needs of the employees in a department. So let's say, for example, is there a need for that particular skill, knowledge, or abilities, right? So step number 2 is to ensure that employees have the motivation. So you have to ask first the employees if they have the motivation and basic skills important or necessary to master that training content. Okay? So step number 3 is to create a learning environment that has the qualities or futures necessary for the learning to occur. Okay? Step number 4 is to ensure that trainees apply the training content to their job. So this step involves having the trainee understand how to manage skill improvement as well as getting to coworker and manager support. Okay, so step number 5 is to develop an evaluation plan. So developing an evaluation plan includes identifying what types of outcomes training is expected to influence for. So let's say, for example, learning or behavior or skills that needed to be evaluated. So choosing an evaluation design that allows you to determine the influence of training on these outcomes. So it is very important for us to have this background or knowledge on evaluation, since this is the measurement on what we have learned from this training. Okay. And of course, choosing evaluation design that allows you to determine the influence of training and these outcomes, and planning how to demonstrate how training affects the bottom line, that is using cost benefit analysis to determine the monetary benefits resulting from the training, because the company is investing to your knowledge as well as your skills, di ba? So hindi ka pwedeng umalis kagad ng company kasi they have invested to your skills and knowledge, no? So there are some, of course, employees who have the guts to leave the company after training or after the learning, after the investment that the company given to them. But I think some of the companies give are giving sanctions to those individuals who have not finished their training. So let's say, for example, in a call center company, if you did not finish your training, I think there are some penalties that will be given to you. Okay, or after the training and then you did not you did not go to employee after the employment proper, and then there are some sanctions, I think, with that. So step number 6 is to choose the training method based on learning objectives and learning environment. Okay, so after knowing the objectives as well as the establishing learning environment, this step may be include a traditional training method. So sometimes, or most often than not, the employers tend to have this face-to-face interaction with the trainer, or sometimes we use e-learning. So ngayong pandemic, we use e-learning using web-based training or mobile learning. So step number 7, okay, is to evaluate the program and make changes in it, or some revisions that might be needed in any or the earlier steps in the process to improve the program so that learning or behavior and change and other learning objectives are obtained. Okay, now let's proceed with adding model again on what are some of the factors that should be noted with this adding model.
HR Basics is a series of short courses designed to highlight what you need to know about a particular human resource management topic. In today's HR Basics, we explore the ADDIE model, discussing the best system for creating great training experiences. Training is the development and delivery of information people will use in their jobs. If you're new to training development and have been thinking of putting together any type of training program, it's important to know and understand the most basic training tool used by professional trainers. It's called the ADDIE model. The ADDIE model is basically a generic, systematic, step-by-step framework used by instructional designers, developers, and trainers to ensure course development and learning does not occur in a haphazard, unstructured way. It's designed to ensure that learners will achieve the goals of the course. It allows for the evaluation of learners' needs, the design and development of training materials, and the evaluation of effectiveness of the training program using processes with specific, measurable outcomes. ADDIE is an instructional systems design, or ISD model. Most of the current instructional design models are spin-offs or variations of the ADDIE model. One commonly accepted improvement to this model is the use of rapid prototyping. This is the idea of receiving continual or formative feedback while instructional materials are being created. This model attempts to save time and money by catching problems while they're still easy to fix. The ADDIE model is a framework that trainers use to develop great training courses. In the first phase, analysis, needs and objectives are established. In the design phase, learning objectives, session structure, and resources are identified. During the development phase, content for the training session is completed. The implementation phase involves the preparation and delivery of training content. And finally, the evaluation phase is ongoing and ensures all stated goals of the learning process will meet the specified needs. The 5 phases, analysis, design, development, implementation, and evaluation, represent a dynamic, flexible guideline for building effective training and performance support tools. In the first phase, analysis, needs, and objectives are established. Analysis is the data gathering element of instructional design. Here, instructional designers assemble all information they can possibly gather about the project before they consider anything else. Decisions about every aspect of the project must eventually be made. The information that instructional designers gather at this stage will be put to use throughout the system, so it's necessary that they have every scrap of data to ensure they design a successful training experience. Below are some of the questions that are addressed during the analysis phase. Who is the audience and what are their characteristics? How do I identify new behavioral outcomes? What types of learning constraints exist? What are the delivery options? What are the online pedagogical considerations? And what is the timeline for project completion? In the design phase, learning objectives, session structure, and resources are identified. Design is the blueprinting stage of instructional systems, during which instructional designers create the blueprint for a project with all the specifications necessary. During this stage, instructional designers write the objectives, construct course content, and complete the design plan. These are the steps used in the design phase. First, documentation of the project's instructional, visual, and technical design strategy. Then, we apply instructional strategies according to the intended behavioral outcomes by a domain, like cognitive, affective, or psychomotor. Then, we create storyboards and design the user interface and user experience. We prototype and create any applications that might be necessary for the training design. And then finally, we apply visual or graphic design. During the development phase, content for the training session is completed. Materials production and pilot testing are hallmarks of development. At this stage, most non-designers begin to see progress. Everything from lecture notes to virtual reality is brought from design to deliverable. Before instructional designers move from the development to implementation, it is wise for them to pilot test to ensure that deliverables do not need to be redeveloped. The implementation phase involves the preparation and delivery of training content. The most familiar of the elements is implementation. At implementation, the design plan meets the learner, and the content is delivered. The evaluation process that most designers and learners are familiar with takes place in this element. Evaluation is used to gauge the degree to which learners meet objectives and facilitators or technologies deliver the project. The evaluation phase is ongoing and ensures all stated goals of the learning process will meet the specified needs. The evaluation phase consists of two parts, formative and summative. Formative evaluation is present in each stage of the ADDIE process. Summative evaluation consists of tests designed for domain-specific, criterion-related referenced items and providing opportunities for feedback. Evaluation doesn't deserve to be listed last in the ADDIE model because it takes place in every element and surrounds the instructional design process. The advantages of using an instructional system are numerous, the most important being the ability to design projects quickly and efficiently. The ADDIE model is best put to use as soon as someone in an organization thinks that there's a need for a training course.
Okay, so this is the model, which is likely very important for you to know, since one of the basic tools that training development instructional development material developer tend to use from time to time. So this is what we call the ADDIE model. Okay, for the next one, we have the instructional system design, or ISD model.
In this short presentation, we will be talking about the processes that instructional designers may use to create instructional materials. First, let's take a look at some of the tools that an instructional designer uses to create instruction. And there are three sort of general categories of tools that instructional designers use. And the first is instructional process. Now, this is something we'll talk about in detail in this presentation, but instructional designers follow systematic processes for creating instruction. This helps to ensure the quality of the instruction. Instructional designers also consider theory. This is sort of a broad term, but theory really helps us understand how people learn and how we can help them to improve their learning. Research and practical experience all inform the theory that we have in the field of instructional design. The third type of tool that instructional designers use is a physical tool. Anything that they use to create the instruction. This can include a pen and paper, a computer, a laptop. It can include a smartphone or a video camera, any physical tool that's used to create the instruction. So in this presentation, we're going to focus on the first one, which is instructional process. Now, there's a general process that's called the ADDIE process. The phases and steps within the ADDIE process are really reflected in almost every instructional design process there is. So let's take a look at what this general process is. The first step in the process is analyze. Before creating any instructional materials, instructional designers really take a close look at several things. First, what are the goals of the instruction? What are the specific objectives or performances that we want our learners to be able to perform? What do the learners in university? So let's take a look at the steps in this process. The first step is to identify instructional goals. In this step, the instructional designer determines what new information and skills they want the learners to have mastered when they complete the instruction. As soon as these instructional goals have been identified, the next step is to conduct an instructional analysis. In this phase, the goal is to take a look at the sub-skills that are necessary to be able to perform the instructional goals. You really need to break down what each goal is into smaller pieces, smaller steps. The next step is to analyze the learners and their contexts. In this step, the goal is to really understand who the learners are, the context in which they're going to be doing the learning, and also the context in which they will actually use the skills. It's really important to know where the learners are so you can build off of that starting point. As soon as you've done these two analyses, the instructional analysis and the learner and context analysis, the next step is to create or write performance objectives. So these are specific statements of what learners will be able to do when they complete the instruction. As soon as the performance objectives have been created, the next step is to develop assessment instruments. Now these really measure the learner's ability to perform whatever you described in those objectives. It's a way of finding out how well your instruction has worked and whether or not the learners have gained what you want them to gain. After developing these instruments, the next step is to develop your instructional strategy. This is similar to the design phase. You plan out your instruction. Really try to figure out how we're going to present new content, examples, demonstrations, how the learners are going to interact with the materials, and how you assess the learners. Your instructional strategy should be based on instructional theory, what we know works in instruction. After developing your instructional strategy, the next step is to develop and select the instructional materials. This is where you actually produce the instruction. And again, this should be based on the instructional strategy that you've created. As soon as these materials are created, the next step is to design and conduct a formative evaluation of the instruction. Remember, this is formative because its purpose is to help create and improve the instructional processes and the products that you've created. So after doing this formative evaluation, you really gain some insights on how to improve the instruction. So in the model, there are these connecting lines where you go back and say, okay, now we know we need to revise the instruction. We may need to conduct another instructional analysis or write some more performance objectives that are more focused on the learners. We may need to develop new assessment instruments or instructional strategies. We might need to develop and select different materials. And we may even need to reanalyze our learners and their contexts. In this way, the systematic design of instruction allows you to revisit steps or phases so that you can really improve and refine your instruction. The final phase is to design and conduct a summative evaluation. This summative evaluation really lets you know whether or not your instruction worked. So this is the systematic design of instruction. You can see how each step or phase builds on the previous. I hope this has been a useful overview of instructional design process, and we will continue to develop videos to help explain instructional design concepts.
Okay, so after giving you the brief background on instructional system design as well as the model, let's proceed with the talent management. Okay, so talent management refers to the systematic planned and strategic effort of the company to use bundles of human resource management practices such as acquiring and assessing the employees, learning and development, performance management, compensation to attract, as well as retaining, develop, and motivating them, those highly skilled employees and managers. Now, talent management is becoming increasingly more important because of changes in demand for the certain occupations and jobs, more particularly with the skill requirements and anticipated retirement of the baby boomer generation, and the need to develop managerial talent and skills of the next generation of the company leader, which is why these companies manage these talents. Okay, so talent management is seen as a strategic business driver to develop talent, all employees that have individual development plans that support their career goals. Okay, so let's watch again another video on talent management.
The definition of talent management can often be perceived as elusive. Human resource professionals themselves commonly have different definitions of talent management. That said, talent management is a set of integrated organizational human resource processes designed to attract, develop, engage, and retain productive, engaged employees. The goal of talent management is to create a high-performance, sustainable organization that meets its strategic and operational goals and objectives. While professional perspectives on talent management vary dramatically, the fact is human resource professionals do talent management on a daily basis. Let's take a look at a model that defines talent management in clear terms. This talent management model illustrates key processes to ensure organizations attract, retain, and engage talented staff. Centered on learning, the processes of recruiting, interviewing, onboarding, and selecting are all major components of talent management. The talent management model is built on the premise that we must attract, retain, and engage employees at all times through all decisions. Let's define each of these three fundamental elements of talent management. Attract, identifying and persuading the right people at the right time for the right reasons. Engage, the extent to which employees are committed to their organization's goals and values, motivated to contribute to organizational success, and the ability at the same time to enhance their own sense of well-being. Retain, a systematic effort focused not only on retaining an organization's talented performers, but also to create and foster a welcoming work environment and high retention culture. The end result is an organization that operates more effectively and efficiently, while being a great place to work. Talent management is centered on employee learning, best accomplished through a learning organization. A learning organization is an organization that has an enhanced capacity to learn, adapt, and change. Many companies, recognizing the strategic importance of learning, have strived to become learning organizations. Training processes are carefully scrutinized and aligned with organizational goals. In a learning organization, training is seen as part of a system designed to create human capital. Recruiting is the process of finding and hiring the best qualified candidate from within or outside the organization for a job opening in a timely and cost-effective manner. The recruitment process includes analyzing the requirements of a job and attracting employees to fill that job. Interviewing, or a job interview, is a type of employment test that involves a conversation between a job applicant and a representative of the organization. Interviews are one of the most popularly used devices for selection. Normally done in face-to-face meetings, an interview involves asking a job applicant questions to determine whether the applicant is suitable for the position. Handled properly, the interview process is undertaken with deliberation and planning to accomplish the task of selecting the best person for the job. Selecting, or selection, is the process of evaluating candidates for a specific job and selecting an individual for employment based on certain criteria. Employee selection can range from a very simple process to a very complicated process depending on the organization hiring and the position. Certain employment laws, such as anti-discrimination regulations, must be obeyed during the selection process. And the final element of the talent management model, onboarding. The onboarding process acclimates new hires and ensures that they quickly feel welcomed and valued by the organization. This process enables new employees to become productive members of the organization who understand expectations and their job roles. Onboarding goes beyond traditional orientation programs, which focus mainly on managing policies, forms, and procedures.
Okay, so after giving a brief background on talent management and its importance, let's proceed with some training development roles. Okay, so there are different training development roles. We have learning strategies. So these individuals determine the how workplace learning can be best used to help meet the company's business strategy. We also have business partner uses business and industry knowledge to create training that improves performance. We also have project manager who plan and obtain and monitor the delivery of learning and performance solutions to support the business. We also have professional specialists who design, develop, deliver, and evaluate learning and performance solutions. Okay, and we also have this ATD competency model, which likely describe on study of training professionals, which had been conducted by this ATD. So figure presented right here is ATD competency model that describe what it takes for an individual to be successful in training and development field. So what are those competencies? So it includes specific areas of expertise and foundational competency. So the areas of expertise include, number one, knowledge and behaviors. We also have this required by different roles such as change management, learning technologies, training delivery. Although training professionals spend most of their time designing learning or instructional design, delivering training as well as managing training programs, identifying, selecting, and using learning technologies as well as coaching, okay, they do not spend time in other areas as well. So the model recognizes that performance improvement, designing and developing solutions to and uh, close performance gaps. Now, talent management, including talent acquisition, development, and retention, and knowledge management are other important areas of these expertise. Okay, so let's proceed for the last video presentation for tonight. This is the competency model.
The ASTD competency model defines what T&D professionals need to know and do to be successful in the field. The last time the ASTD model was revised was 2004. So what's happened since then? Facebook was a Mark Zuckerberg creation that existed in his Harvard dorm room. Twitter didn't even exist, and it wasn't until 2007 that the first iPhone was introduced. Since then, many factors have triggered the 2013 revision. This includes the rise of digital, mobile, and social media, increased globalization, and shifting demographics. These factors have shaped the field over the last decade. Since 2004, the model has been simplified. It now has 2 major parts instead of 3. The areas of expertise are the functional technical areas that are specific to the T&D profession. There are now 10. Learning technologies was added as the 10th AOE in 2013. The foundational competencies, shown at the bottom, are the business managerial skill sets required for nearly all occupations. There are now 6. 3 were added in 2013. Specifically, global mindset, industry or sector knowledge, and technology literacy. Some key themes have also emerged. These included the importance of technology and using it well, the rise of informal learning, collaborative learning, and mobile learning approaches, and the importance of learning analytics. One theme continues to remain front and center, and that is, it's critical for T&D professionals to be business partners and business leaders. The Career Navigator, as shown above, is a related tool. It provides T&D professionals with ways to identify their own skill gap and ways to close them by providing a customized roadmap and developmental resources. The model also touches a number of ASTD programs and offerings, including the CPLP certification program, otherwise known as the Certified Professional in Learning and Performance. Updates to related programs will continue to take effect through 2014.
Okay, so I hope you have learned a lot this tonight with our training development, introduction to training and development. So this concludes our discussion for tonight. For a while.